I looked it up because I wondered what the hell that meant. But it means retired in good standing, which, that's okay. One of my colleagues, he teaches like some of the pre-vet stuff. He calls me emeritus because he thinks it's some kind of a disease. But anyway, a little bit of qualifying here. I got my bachelor's and master's from Fort Hays State in Hays, Kansas. Okay, hey, wow, that's actually a pretty good little school. But my degree was in rangeland management from there. Actually, I started out in biology, but I had such a good time that freshman year that my grades weren't very good, and so I switched over to agriculture. And then about halfway through my junior year, I decided that the guys that were getting an agriculture degree from Kansas State University down in Manhattan would beat the heck out of us guys getting an ag degree at Fort Hays State. So I started taking courses that were more ecologically oriented in the range management area. So that's what I did. Then I graduated from there with a master's in '68, and I went to Texas and started working with the Texas A&M Experiment Station out in Lubbock, Texas. No. Lubbock, Texas, pretty flat out there.
Rearview mirror.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, with a 707 even. But anyway, so it worked out there. But I was doing mesquite control, working on a mesquite control project. And my part of that project was really to assess what happened after the mesquite was controlled, what kind of responses we got from the vegetation. I was not so much the squirt and peak guy, but more of a evaluate the response to the different treatments we did. And we did a lot of things. We did herbicides, we did grubbing, we did root plowing. If you burn mesquite, you're just going to regrow, so that was not a real big part of our project. And then in 1977, ASU had a job opportunity come up, and I applied for it, and they took me. And so I've been here since '77, and worked primarily in teaching things like soils and watershed management and those kinds of things. But I always had kind of a feeling for invasive plant species and that kind of thing. And so after I found out that about everybody and their twin brother was wanting to work on water resources in the state and that kind of stuff, I did do quite a bit of riparian habitat research for about my first 10 or 12 years here. Then I started getting more and more kind of in the invasive species type stuff. And I want to put a plug in for one of the invasive species that's been around here ever since Zorro showed up, and that's red brome grass. Now, red brome grass grows out in all of our desert open spaces too. Typically, we're going to see it in years like this where it's been fairly wet. We'll see a lot of it. Local people, a lot of times, they call that foxtail. But red brome grass starts out growing early in the fall. When we get to fall, it start getting fall rains and early winter rains. And for the first several months, it's actually a pretty good forage plant. It's good for livestock. It's good for animals, a lot of the animals. It's even good for desert tortoises if they're not hibernating at that time. And but then once it sets up that seed head, then a lot of the animals quit using fears with animals eating it. And you guys been around here for a while. Remember the Cave Creek Complex fire?
Yeah.
That thing was primarily fueled by red brome grass that spring. So you get a lot of red brome grass, and that stuff's very flammable, and away we go. So I've been working on it too, and in fact, next week I go to Maui, Hawaii to give a talk about red brome grass control at a conference there. So woohoo, you know. Lots of times when I go to conferences, I give my wife a choice. Do you want to go with me? And she decides she'll go to Maui with me. But sometimes she'll say, no, I don't want to go that place. Okay, but anyway, now I'm supposed to talk about Stinknet. Oh yeah, this stuff. Well, Stinknet, it's got, whoa, that's so we don't trip on stuff. We have to figure out what it is first, and we did a good presentation on how to figure it out, but there's a few things that kind of look like it, particularly before it gets stinky. This is one of them that I just pulled up out of one of my neighbor's yard because I treat my yard and I don't have weeds. That's a joke. But this, at the early stages, people might get confused with this, but this is fillery. This is Rhodium cicaterium. You know, whip up Willie. Hi, Willie. We'll whip up some scientific names on you. This is Rhodium cicaterium. This is also introduced by the Spanish, by the way. But the characteristic of it gets a little purple flower on it, but then when it starts seeding, it puts out these what they call heron bills type fruits. Okay. So, but early on, you might look at this kind of a dissected leaf like this and think, oh, that's a little stinknet, but it doesn't smell like the stinknet, you know, so that's not it. Also, out of Ed's yard next to me, I pulled this stuff up, and this one, once it flowers, it gets a flower and it looks like a carrot. And so, I'm not even sure what the heck the name of this thing is, but it's kind of like a wild carrot looking thing. And again, you might consider this might be a stinknet when you first see it, but the deal is the stinknet has much finer divided leaves, really, really fine divided leaves. So anyway, at last winter's Southwest Vegetation Management meeting, we started to talk about stinknet because we've had we had a wet winter or two, and that's when the stuff really takes off and goes. It really blossoms out, if you want to put it that way, at that time. And so they were saying, well, we ought to do something about that stuff. And so one of the things that the Southwest Vegetation Management was...
Can I persuade you to use a microphone?
Oh, pardon me, I'll get over here. I'll get back to here then.
We're recording this, so we can play it back later.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, anyway, does this work? Yeah, okay, sorry about that. But anyway, they decided, well, let's get Brock to do something. And so I started saying, well, I know there's quite a few the stinknet is. One of them, of course, is Bain Avery Game and Fish Department's shooting range out there, because that's kind of the epicenter of it in this valley here. Really a lot of it out there. And they're doing some stuff about it out there, like they control it right along the roads in some of their camping areas. But tomorrow I'm going to be out there staking a bunch of plots that I'm going to spray probably Thursday for stinknet control. I've got 16 different treatments going to put out there Thursday. Some of them are, well, I've got one of the treatments is a three-way combination of 3 different chemicals mixed together. And when I do that kind of stuff, I always put the 3-way out, but what I always do is put each individual out, because I want to know who's doing the heavy lifting in that. Because you could put a 3-way combination treatment out and go, looks really good, but you could find out, wait, one of those just by itself is just as good as 3-way. Save people a lot of money, maybe. But anyway, I'm going to be doing that. What I want to talk to about is, after that deal up there, we were meeting in Flagstaff. We were going to do the stinknet control stuff, so I started looking for a site. Well, ADOT's got a bunch of it. And there's a site we looked at I-17 and 303, where that road is out there in the North Valley. What I call it North Valley since I live in Tempe. But anyway, that's where that one was. Then Ben Avery. But you know, to work on any state land, puts since I don't have any people working for me anymore, I'm just a one-man band, I let that drop. And they said, no, you're going to have liability insurance. So I went to shop around for liability insurance. And when I canceled that a few years ago, it was almost $1,000 a year. So I shopped around a little bit, and I found some for $680. So I bought that policy. So that's the first thing I had to do. I had to get that so I could get entry fee. But the people at Game and Fish decided, you know, they were saying they were pretty interested in me come and do some stuff. So that's where I'm going to put the plots out. Now I did a bunch of individual plot, or not individual, pre-emergent plot treatments in November. The thing was, when we had our meeting was in October, you know, and getting everything set up to do the pre-emergent stuff on these particular sites, I just didn't have the time to do it. Because the thing with pre-emergent herbicide is you want to put it on the day before it rains. Okay, yeah, that's supposed to be a joke. But, you know, if you listen to the local weather guys, you know, they'll probably tell you pretty close to when it's going to rain. But most of them work for the Chamber of Commerce, I think. And they always kind of like, we had a nice rain this weekend, and they were poo-pooing it. Oh, my God, it washed out the baseball games. I thought, well, you know. But anyway, so the site I used for this, and even had to fool around for a while to get kind of permission, if you want to put it that way, to do this site. It's a site on the intersection of Higley and Williams Field Road, about a couple of miles west of where ASU Polytechnic campus is. And so First couple times I asked out there, boy, there's just a bunch of stinknet in between. There's a railroad goes through there. There's a whole bunch of stinknet between that and kind of an industrial area, some landscaping companies in there. So I went and said, hey, I'd like to work on this pre-emerge herbicide and stinknet. Well, we don't know who owns that land. We just rent this place. And so finally, after a couple of weeks of talking to those people, but going back, well, we found out the owner actually lives in Canada. And they have a land management group, a management group that works for them. And we contacted them, and they said, what's Stinknet? And so the guy finally says, just go spray it. And so I put several compounds on that Stinknet on there. It was November 23rd is when I sprayed it. And so everything was just dry as could be right then. And there was a lot of Stinknet in there, by the way. There was a lot of carcasses of the stuff about this shape, you know, about that kind of shape. But they were like at least 2 to 3 feet tall, a real thatch of that stuff in there. So anyway, I staked out my plots. I sprayed that thing on November 23rd, and about 4 or 5 days later, we got a really nice rain. I went out there about a week after that rain, and that ground looked like moss. It was so green with all these little seedlings of stinknet, just as green, like I told people, it looked like moss. And so I've been doing evaluations of that. I did a 30-day evaluation after treatment. I've done a 60-day evaluation after treatment. And I'll tell you the worst news first. The control plots are very nice and green, and a whole bunch of stuff growing in them. Okay, that's the worst news. One of the herbicides I used was I went to, but the same thing I use in my yard at home. I went to Bug and Weed Mart and got some what they call weed impede, and I sprayed it, and that only controlled about 50% of the stinknet out there. So that's not too swift on that particular plant. And then I used several other chemicals. I used the Milestone that they were mentioned a while ago. Milestone is now, well, the company that makes the stuff now is called Corteva, because they changed their name from Dow AgroSciences a while back. You know, the chemical companies are all kind of consolidating, and pretty soon there's going to be about 2 chemical companies, Corteva and Bayer, I think are going to be the big winners. But anyway, so Milestone I'll say at a quarter of a pound per acre, 4 ounces per acre, worked really, really well. Like, I can't find any stinknet in those plots. So I did Milestone, so that's a really good pre-emerge. I used a chemical called Method, which is made by Bayer. That did really well. That scored out at about 95%. I used a chemical called Escort, which is also now that Bayer bought a bunch of stuff from DuPont, that's a Bayer product too. That also was very effective for controlling it. So now we got 3. I used an old herbicide that a guy up in New River claims worked really well. It's called Simazine is the old name. It's sold under the name of Princep. The place where it's still used is for weed control in orchards. And that stuff's been around since, well, since I first started doing stuff. I can remember we planted a bunch of grasses when I was working in Texas, range grasses in Texas. A bunch of weeds came in our plot, and that was one of the herbicides we used on those plots is Princep. That was about 1970, someplace in there. So that herbicide's been around for a long, long time. The negative on it is that it's very water soluble, and so it can leach into the aquifers. And where they've used it for years and years, and its twin sister called atrazine, a lot of those aquifers in Iowa now just got lots of that old herbicide in it, and it doesn't degrade very well. So Princep worked really well, but I'm not a big cheerleader for it. And let's see, did I leave anybody out? No, I didn't. So there's about 4 herbicides that worked really, really well. Roundup, Method, which is not labeled yet. Method is not labeled for, well, it's not labeled for range work, it's for right-of-ways it is, so you could use it on roadsides and so on. Escort is an older herbicide. It's labeled for about any place you want to use it. And then the other one that worked pretty well was with the Simazine. But all those plots at 30 days and 60 days, all of them were scoring well over 90% control, except for the that weed impede stuff that I got at Bug and Weed Mart. Probably what it was is I didn't put it out as strong as maybe as I should have, but I wanted to have all the herbicide rates about equal, so I didn't have, like, except for the Princep stuff, which they told me, oh, you should put that out at, I put it out at a pound per acre, 16 ounces per acre. And then one of the wise guys let me know that that's not enough, that you need 2 pounds per acre, or 32 ounces. So there are some spots out there, so I went in and I treated the edges of on the edge of the plots, and so I treated some more of that with 2 pounds. But all that Princep worked 1 or 2 pounds, both of it worked. So anyway, there's some hope down the line. Now, glyphosate is not a pre-emerge herbicide. You know, it does have very little soil activity, but it's a post-emerge herbicide. So once the stuff going, people will treat Stinknet with Roundup herbicide, probably about at least 2%, which I like to talk about percentages rather than ounces, because that's a lot easier to figure out than figure out the weights. But anyway, about 2%. But with MSO, now MSO is fancy letters for methylated seed oil. Okay. So what they do is they take a soybean oil and then they, quote, methylate it, stick a little bit of carbon stuff on the side. And what the MSO does is on these really fine leaves, it helps, when the herbicide hits the leaf, it helps spread it a little bit on the leaf and helps penetrate the leaf better. That's why they put the MSO in it. And we recommend about 1% of that per liter. So when I do stuff, I put 40 milliliters of MSO into a gallon of water, because a gallon of water, you all know, is 3,785 milliliters, right? Yeah, I knew you guys knew that. So anyway, but those pre-emerge herbicides are working really well. Now next year what I'll do is probably do basically kind of the same treatments, again, probably out Bay and Avery then, because we've got lots of land out there that's got Stinknet. And so I'll do that 2 years in a row. And one of the reasons you do that, if you want to publish this stuff, the journals a lot of times, they want at least 2 years of treatment data. So the plots are all replicated, so I can do statistical analysis and all that fun stuff with them. So anyway, I'm about running out of gas for what I need to talk, but I'd be very happy to answer any questions you have. Yes, back there.
You mentioned Roundup. What I found on that stuff is it doesn't work when it's cold. And by the time it warms up enough for Roundup to work, stuff's already flying.
Yeah, the weeds, yeah. Weeds are always easier to control when they're smaller. Yeah, my boss in Texas used to say, when we were doing brush control, why wait till the brush can hide an elephant? Let's get after the little guys, you know. Yes, sir. Oh, back here. I'll give the guy with the big hat, with the cowboy hat.
I treated 3 acres the last 2 years with 2 ounces per gallon of Roundup. It takes 2 weeks for it to die.
Yes, it does.
Earlier, when it's little, it's almost too late now.
Yeah, it's timing's the deal.
It works great.
Yeah. So you said 2 ounces?
2 ounces per gallon.
Yeah.
It costs me a total of $10 per acre.
Yeah.
Because glyphosate, but you have to use the surfactant.
Right, you have to have a surfactant in it. Right, it does. And you didn't pay yourself, did you? No, okay. Yeah, you need to figure in your labor cost. I just kidding. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah, so if you cut it down like with a weed eater down to like an inch or two, does it double it? Does that?
You know, I don't know. My guess would be if you cut it down like that and it's got enough leaves on the bottom, it's just going to spread it out. That's what I think is going to happen. That'll be what goes on. Yes?
Are there any organic products that can be used besides something that's
Well, the organic product that a lot of people might try is put a really stiff dose of vinegar on it.
I tried that,
Doesn't it? Oh, okay.
even vinegar with Dawn and salt.
Yeah, yeah,
I eradicated those 1.25 acres of mine of that.
yeah.
It's distinct from that weed, and the way I did it is when it was a little higher,
took a flamethrower and knocked it down to the ground,
Yeah,
and then put Roundup on it, and it goes away.
I see. So you,
But you have about 320 acres on state trust land between Desert Hills and Irvine, between Central and 7th Avenue, that is filled with this.
yeah,
And it's invading my neighbors and me. Fortunately, I'm going to help the neighbor, but we have a real problem in that area,
Yeah.
just east of Ben Avery.
I bet. I know.
Up into the city park,
Yeah.
the search and rescue about a mount side,
Yeah.
all the way across.
Can I speak to flamethrowers, please?
Yes. Speak of flame fire.
Please do.
Use caution.
Oh, yeah.
We had a guy burn half his house down because he was using a flamethrower up towards the house, and it hit, of all things, a spider web, which commuted inside the house and burned it up. So be careful.
I certainly don't do it near the house or the
please.
shed. for that matter.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you guys how important.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go.
I can't tell you guys how important it is for us, for you to knock this problem down. 2 years ago, we had a fire at Fleming Springs and Spurgrass. Last year, we had a fire over towards the mayor's house, where you could see this Stinknet, once it dried out, it moves faster than we can move. So I could bring up 100 fire trucks, and if there's a big monsoon wind, we're not gonna stop it. So the only way we can stop it is eradicate it. And that's getting out and working in your yard. And we talked about a weed eater doesn't really help. If it's dead and you haven't got to it and you knock it down, you're gonna spread the seeds, but you're gonna make the problem this tall instead of this.
That's right.
tall.
Yeah.
And this tall puts the fire up into the larger bushes, and the trees, we call it, it gets it into the ladder fuel, and then it's gone.
Yep.
You've got fuel right now in those areas that I just talked about, state trust land, from last year and the year before.
Oh, yeah.
It's this high with the new growth coming in.
Right.
And it's going to be even denser between Central and 7th Avenue, between Irvine and Desert Hills, as well as south of there, south of Joy Ranch, where the folks ride the horses out there. It is absolutely as thick as this carpet.
And that's really anywhere where there's.
So we're going to have it all surrounding our house.
My neighbor has 2.5 acres. It's
How do we get the
this
state
tall
to do
dead,
something about
and
that,
I
is
don't
my
have
point.
a single weed in my yard, so.
How do you get the state to do something about those two areas?
That's a big battle. That's a big battle. The state, well, I'm not going to say.
State's not here, I hope.
Yeah, well, a little bit of it is. But anyway, ADOT's trying to do some stuff, and I went out and talked to ADOT, the guys, I don't know even where in the world it was, out in the West Valley someplace a couple years ago. And I was talking to them about controlling this stuff, and they just kind of looked at me like I was silly. And I think they probably wished the hell they would have done something by then, because it was just on the edge of the roads out there. But now it's spread out into the open, what if you want to call it, open desert, that direction. So,
It's in the land department. All their state trust land is just covered with it.
yes, they've got a lot of it. Yeah. So anyway, questions back this way now.
Trying crossbow 2,4-D, any negatives, trying to take out some stuff, room as well.
Yeah.
But so far it's slow.
Yeah, take a while. Before it really starts showing up, if it kills it. Yes, ma'am, there.
We're on 5 acres, and everything around us is 5 acres. Therefore, MAOS, we're not supposed to touch anything. We've got some of the fountain grass and, the really tall grasses that you're seeing in between creosotes and stuff. Am I allowed to go and try to get something that's really not okay and pull it out because it's going to spread fire throughout?
So you're in some kind of homeowner association?
No, we are not in an association of any kind, but when you buy the properties, a part of the land has to be dedicated to NAOS. You are legally not supposed to touch it. You you are not supposed to cut mistletoe out of trees. And I don't care, but I just don't know to what extent that's.
Well, let me put it this way: if I had some fountain grass coming in on my place, I just wouldn't tell anybody about when I took it out. Yeah. You know. What?
What does NOS stand for?
I don't know.
Natural open space.
Natural open space. Oh yeah, yeah.
Dedicate that to your property, and we're all 5 acres and now it's
Yeah. Well,
do whatever you want.
Do you live in Scottsdale?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured with the NAOS. I do too, and don't follow my example, but there isn't one piece of Stinknet in my NAOS.
I got it.
I took it all out.
I got it.
yeah. My caution about Stinknet would be right now it's be pull pretty easy because it rained, but wear a nice pair of gloves because I'm not real sure whether, and I don't want you guys to be the test persons for this, but I would think some people but maybe have a little allergic to it are they might break out with a bad rash. Worse yet, they might blister. You know, get some blistery looking stuff from those kind of that stuff. So we not interested. Yes, ma'am.
I broke out bad from it, but I use Grazon Next
Yeah.
at 5 ounces for
She uses
Grazon Next.
Grazon Next. Yeah.
Milestone.
No, it's not.
Well, it's got a lot of the same chemicals in it. I don't know what the, yeah.
I'd have to look at the label,
Okay.
but I think it's got triclopyr as the main comment in it. Yeah. Yeah.
But it, 5 ounces per 3 gallons of water, and it's taking it out. And again.
I would just think so. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have some triclopyr put out at the. Actually, I'm going to have some triclopyr put out at what's the name of that place? Ben Avery. And I'm also going to put out a herbicide called Reclaim, which works. It normally works really well on these Asteraceae. Its chemical name is called clopyralid. But it was sold under the name of Reclaim. Now, I went to look it up on the label the other day. Now it's called Long Trail. And what these chemical companies do about every 10 years or so, they rename their product and then claim they've got something different. But it's all the same, kind of the same stuff. Yes, sir.
Could you define or tell me what it means that it's on the noxious weed list?
Yes, I can tell you exactly that because we worked for a long dang time to get that thing through the government. The Southwest Vegetation Management Association, we have been, well, for at least ever since, Southwest Vegetation Management is about 25 years old now as an organization. We started about that time trying to get the Department of Agriculture to open up the noxious weed list so we could add some stuff to it, and we took a bunch out to things like, they had some stuff there nobody knew what it was because we never seen it in the state before. And then we found out, well, it was a weed in California for a while, and they didn't want it over here, so they put it on the list here. But the noxious weed list essentially is, it's not enforced very well. But what it is, if these plants are on this noxious weed list, supposedly you're supposed to remove them from your property. Okay? So it's got things on it like fountain grass and buffalo grass and this stinknet now. Salt cedar. I don't know if we got Russian olive put onto that list or not, which is a really invasive tree up particularly northern part of the state in the riparian areas. But there's quite a few. So you go to the state agriculture department, plant services division, and you'll find that noxious weed list there.
So to follow up, if it's on the list and it's not being eradicated by someone, it's allowed to turn into like that picture that
Yeah.
we saw, what do you do about that?
Not much. One of the things we ran into, though. Yeah, I know. But actually, what the noxious weed list is, if it's on your property, you're supposed to remove that plant. That's what it is. There's no teeth behind it, though. No. No.
What herbicides affect your well? I mean, I'm worried about the stuff I'm drinking in there.
Herbicides affect your what?
Well.
Well?
It goes down into the soil.
Well, that simazine one is that Princept is the one I'd be concerned about that.
Is that the only one?
How about all of us?
No, a lot of them we just don't know yet.
No. So I'm the
It's pretty much. The Roundup herbicide would degrade in the soil in about a year.
Say again?
Roundup herbicide degrades in the soil within a year.
We know that.
Yep. Yep, aminopyrrolid. One of the nice things about aminopyrrolid, which is milestone, by the way, it hangs around the soil for a couple of years. That's why we get some residual weed control out of it. Because we're going to get weed control. We got this pre-emergent weed control out there at Higley. I would suspect that next year we're also going to get weed control from that milestone on the second year. And so it hangs around the soil a while. But you have to remember, those compounds are basically they're organic compounds. And when the soil bacteria stuff sees those, they go, oh, that's food. And they'll start breaking it down. That Princept, yeah, that one there is different, little different story. Has a different I wouldn't drink it. Yeah. Oh, you mean out of the water? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. One of the things you can do, I know this is really educational, but you can go on the web, put in milestone label, and you can print off the milestone label, and you can just read all the good stuff about milestone on there, and it'll talk about how its degradation and how long it should last in the soil and water and stuff like that. Milestone. Yeah. All of them. All of those herbicides, you can go to the website, and just put in the chemical name and ask for the label, and then they'll pull up the label. It is, if you're having trouble going to sleep at night, those are pretty good things to read. Yeah, because they've got a terrible amount of information on them, though.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
milestone is a pre-emergent.
It acts as,
Put it on at the end of November.
yes, right before it rains. Now, the other thing, milestone is interesting compound because it works as a pre-emergent and it also works as post-emergent. Yeah, so you can go out and spray this stuff when it's this size or maybe this size and it should work. Yeah, so it's pre-emergent, yes, and it degrades fairly well, a couple of years. Yes, sir.
Put Pindy down in November.
Put who?
P-I-N-D, it's Penta.
Oh, pentamethylin? Yeah.
And that keeps it from coming up as well.
Right. There's several pre-emergent herbicides. That's one of them. That stuff that's called, they sell it under the name of Weed Impede at Bug and Weed Mart. That's where I got it. That's I can't remember. I can't pronounce it. Yeah. But there's several pre-emerged herbicides that probably work. We just haven't tested those.
Just so you know, that one works.
Yeah.
And for when it's cool and the stuff comes up, and there's a product called Polaris AC.
Oh, yeah.
It works down about 45 degrees. Is there something bad about it?
Oh, Polaris? Yeah. Well, that's the chemical name for that is imazapyr.
Okay.
Yeah. Imazapyr sprayed on salt cedar would kill the hell out of it. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, imazapyr.
Takes 3 weeks.
Yeah, but the thing about imazapyr that some people don't like is they think it kills a lot of the soil biota, a lot of the bacteria and so on. And I used to talk about imazapyr in my classes at ASU because it's a really good herbicide to control Russian olive, salt cedar, and that kind of stuff. One of my students always called it imazapper, but not imazapyr. But anyway, yeah, that's Polaris. And what the deal is, these herbicides, when the chemical company discovers these herbicides and they finally take them through all the business to get them approved by EPA and all that kind of stuff, usually takes about 10 to 15 years. I think the cost of that is now about $15 million to get that compound. So if they've got a compound that shows up and they have a reason to think it's got any kind of problems, they don't even try to get it on the market because they just say it's not worth the trouble go through. So the reason it costs so much is, they figure out it's got activity on plants, first of all. And then if it looks pretty good, then they grant out to people like me, and that costs a lot of money. That's a joke. To do field testing. They do field testing, then they have more extensive field testing thing. So, but it costs about 15 million, or a little bit more than that, to get a herbicide registered. And so there's not very many of them ever get registered every year, very few. More so in the agronomic area, in the field crops and stuff, mainly because that generates money. But boy, for rangelands and forests, there aren't very many at all get approved. And so That's that part. And Milestone is one of those that's used in range and forestry work, pasture work. But Milestone's also got a little thing on the label, and that method herbicide's going to have a little thing on the label. If you look at the label, it's going to have a picture of a cow doing what cows do best, making cow pies. And what it does is it says, for 2 years after application, if you're going to graze cattle, you can't take them out of that pasture because they can move that stuff around. And so, and it also, if you take forage or plant material treated with that stuff and do like composting, it'll exist in compost for a couple of years too. So there's a little thing on the front label that tells you how to handle material that's been sprayed with that, as far as animal use and composting. The easy way around that is, if you're going to treat a bunch of country that you're going to have cattle in graze, just don't graze it for 2 years, you know. And that's what we used to recommend when I worked in Texas anyway. Spray the mesquite, don't graze it for a couple of years, because what that did, it let all the natural native grasses get that boost from having the mesquite controlled, and they can grow and get stronger and that kind of stuff. So we would, a lot of times, would recommend people not graze for 2 years after they sprayed anyway, just to help heal the system up. Yes, sir?
Just a quick question about the grazing. What effect is all this going to have on, like, the deer and rabbits, horses, stuff like that? Because, I mean, it's going to get all over, right?
Yeah. When all these chemicals are before they come on the market, though, there's a whole host of stuff they tested on. They, you know, there's a whole host of organisms that they treated on, you know. Baby mallard ducks get a bunch of it, the rats and the mice are done. When they evaluate that, they look for two things in the mammals: carcinogenic, or the carcinogenic, or they also called mutagenic. Does it kind of affect the genes in the plant or the animal? And so there's a lot of stuff they do, you know. And they, you know, use several fishes, a bunch of birds. Well, most of the mammal stuff is done on rats and mice. And they even use mice that are, and rats that are, have been selected that are more prone for to show up tumors and things than the normal run-of-the-mill cats or the rats are. Yeah, so it's a pretty extensive testing program. Yeah, and just here lately too, EPA has just gone through all the Roundup stuff and said, we believe the stuff is safe to use. Oh, even though they had that big lawsuit in California. And if you watch TV at night, you'll be, you know, if you're getting some kind of cancer and you've used Roundup, please contact us. And, you know, the ambulance chaser type guys. But again, you know, just be cautious about how you use this stuff. Don't just go sloshing around like a wild
Herbicides that you mentioned, less harmful to cactus and
well, I've sprayed a bunch of this stuff out around Milestone and also that method stuff out by the superstitions when I was trying to control two things, cat claw and mesquite. And there was prickly pear and those kinds of guys growing right next to it, and never saw any effect on those.
Those are pre-emergents?
No, that was post-emergent stuff. But it was also pretty much directed spray too, where I was actually spraying the target plant, not just, right. And so some of it could have got over there.
Well, that's the intent, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, lady back there.
Do you have to do the spraying when it's already leafing in order to be absorbed into the plant? Or if you miss it when it's small and it's larger, can you dig down a little bit and get into the soil and just saturate by spots, or no?
For what?
For a weed,
Well,
something that's not really.
Yeah, that's a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but if it's in an area where you really don't want it.
Right, yeah.
Trouble, will it work if you're just concentrating into the soil and the roots, or does it?
No, you can do that. It depends on the compound, though. A lot of those compounds, some of those compounds, and you'll have to go back and read the label of what you want to use. But a lot of those compounds, when it gets in the soil, it binds up with the soil organic matter and the clay in the soil, and it might not go anywhere. You know, just stay there. And so, you know, digging around those individual plants. Now, there's some herbicides out there that'll probably do the job for you, but I wouldn't tell you to use them.
There's one area now in neighborhood like Desert Bloom on undeveloped property.
Yeah.
Just south of Dynamite. Is, you know, they're 15, 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
So you go out and where the source is,
Yeah.
cutting them down, but
Oh.
you gotta do something.
Yeah, you got to do something. And here's what I would do to those little buggers. Desert broom is harder to control than you guys think it is. Okay, and it's nasty. You cut it down, and then use a solution of your stuff that Grazon or Garlon. But anyway, what it is, the active ingredient is called triclopyr. But use about a 25% solution of that compound in oil, and just spray those cut stems.
20%?
Yeah, that's close enough.
20%
Yeah, in oil. And you can use, you know, you can get fancy and buy some kind of basil oil, or you can go to a grocery store and buy the cheapest cooking oil you can get. Put it in that. And, you know, spray it right on those cut branches. We usually tell people to do it within 30 minutes. Okay? That's because you cut those things, and immediately that plant says, I've been cut. And so what it does is starts putting some sap up there, and once that sap kind of coats those ends, it's harder for the stuff to penetrate it. So do it then.
to the city and it's about forcing the owner, they don't care.
Yeah.
Fire department about it.
Yeah.
Massive blowing, beautiful things.
Yeah. But desert broom is harder to control than you think, and I think we're going to be told to go home for supper.
We're going to take one or two more questions and then try and wrap it up. There is an email sheet up here called Desert Defenders. Feel free to add yourself for that. That's Maricopa County, and they deal with invasive weeds and species. They're a good resource. We will have the brochures at Town Hall, and you will be able to find that information on their website as well. But we'll take one or two more questions and wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
So I have an acre and a half of stinkweed, which I knocked down last year.
Yeah.
Pulled it on my string trimmer.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to do it again this year because it's already this high. After that, what is the process of pre and post emergence? Timing-wise?
It's timing-wise. So timing, like I said, the pre-emergent in the fall, we want to try to get it on before the winter rains start. And I would say a couple weeks before that. So really kind of pay attention to the weather forecast, what's coming. And, you know, if you got the stuff in the bucket, get out there and do it just about a week or two before. Well, the day before, but anyway, then that would do it.
But not during the monsoon rains?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. What you want to do is get this stuff on the point when those plants start germinating, then you can get it on. But for pre-emerge. The post-emerge, you know, stuff about this size, this is about what it looks like out of Ben Avery right now, except when it's got really good microsite. Ben Avery, if it's kind of a really nice warm spot, they look like this now. So.
If I knock it down now, is it going to come back?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
The plant itself grow?
Yeah, probably will. These things are tough. Yes, sir. There, somebody.
I just wanted to know where to buy like milestones.
Aha. This is called Internet. Huh? Yeah, you can get it on the internet, Milestone. There's also a couple places in, oh gosh, they've changed their name too.
Like would Tractor Supply have it?
I don't think so. I don't think Tractor Supply has it. But
It says Tractor Supply on the internet, and it says Walmart too. But
yeah, well, you don't want to buy it at Walmart. I've got a special thing about Walmart, and I don't go there.
Excuse me, sir, but that's our largest sales tax generator.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Last two questions right here.
Lady right here in the.
I just want to, because we and many people are not, don't like that. So we did the mixture of vinegar, salt, and dish soap.
Mm-hmm.
Double the salt though, and double the dish soap.
Yeah.
And it got killed it.
Yeah.
They're very non
It'll also kill the insects that'll live. Well, the insects not going to live on this stuff, though.
What about the Roundup? Is that going to kill the insects?
What?
Will the Roundup leave the insects alone?
Basically, there's no insects live on this stuff anyway.
Okay. So,
They're smarter than that.
like, can that harm the surrounding, like, cactus or, what we're doing?
Probably not. Probably not. Unless you're really doping it up with a lot of salt, and I doubt if you are.
I am tilling it at like this deep to cut any root that might be there. I have turned my entire garden 4 times.
This is an annual plant. You don't have to worry about those roots.
The root is the problem.
The root isn't the problem. The seeds are the problem on this plant. Yeah, just the fact that there, and then I'm going to have to quit.
So the garlic herbicide, you recommend that?
Garland? It's a wild guess. I don't know of any. I haven't seen it put on anything yet, but I would think it would work. I really do. Nothing particularly. Garland is fairly short-lived in the environment. 6 months is about it. Yeah. Okay.
Mayor's got one last message for us.
Here we go.
Thank y'all for coming. Hey, John Kratz asked me to remind everyone that, that's Chief Kratz with Rural Metro, that no matter what you do, before it dries out and turns into a fire hazard, please do something with it. That's the key, is let's just get rid of it.
Good idea.
Thank you all so much, everybody. Yes, if you guys